Good evening. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Sophie. On behalf of Books and Books in Miami, Florida, it's my pleasure to welcome you to a virtual evening with J. Ryan Stradal to celebrate the release of his latest book, Saturday Night at the Lakeside Supper Club, published by our friends at Pamela Dorman Books. A story of a couple from two very different restaurant families in rustic Minnesota and the legacy of love and tragedy, of hardship and hope that unites and divides them. J. Ryan Stradal is the author of New York Times bestseller Kitchens of the Great Midwest and national bestseller The Lager Queen of Minnesota. His writing has appeared in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Guardian, Granta, the Rumpus, and the Los Angeles Review of Books. His debut, Kitchens of the Great Midwest, won the American Booksellers Association Indies Choice Award for Adult Debut Book of the Year. Born and raised in Minnesota, he now lives in California with his family. Moderating tonight's conversation, Katie Taylor is an avid reader, creator of The Grateful Read, a fiction-dedicated Instagram account with over 28,000 followers, and previously worked in book publishing as a marketer at Dutton, Plume, and Tiny Reparations Books, divisions of Penguin Random House. She has worked with authors including Adriana Trigiani, Drew Barrymore, Riley Sager, John Green, Hank Green, Dr. Anna Lemke, Jonathan Evison, Kai Harris, and more. She now works in product marketing for a large technology company and lives in Darien, Connecticut with her husband Matt and two dogs, Murphy and Jude. Just a quick reminder that throughout this broadcast, you can post questions below in the Ask a Question feature. That'll be at the bottom of your screen. I highly encourage you guys to participate. We'll do a Q&A at the end. Please order your copy of Saturday Night at the Lakeside Supper Club from Books and Books and support independent bookstores. You can click the green button below to purchase. Now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guests to the virtual stage.
Hello.
Hi, Katie. Great to be here with you.
It's so exciting to be here with you. I think this is like one of my biggest dreams come true.
Oh, wow.
No, I think we've talked about this before, and we'll dive into all the good stuff. But I have been a fan of J. Ryan since all of the books, and I especially loved this one. And it's also special because it's was published at a place I used to work. So it's kind of incredible. And I know Sophie was just kind of talking about the different places where your books have been featured. And so I wasn't going to start this way with all my questions, but before we dive into more about this story, J. Ryan, the praise for this book is insane. I saw Roxane Gay say that this is a perfect book. And when I saw that, I almost was like, I need to drop everything right now. And then there's just been so many amazing, pieces of coverage. So, I mean, before I ask you to talk a little bit more about the book, how has all of this felt, and how are you feeling about it? The book tour, the book being out, all the good stuff.
Oh, well, first of all, thanks, Katie. It's an honor to be here with you. I really appreciate it. Your kind messages over the years and your support of my books. We can't do it without you. Like, I feel like, like to get to do this event with an avid reader like yourself it's a real honor, and it means a lot to me. So thank you for taking the time. It's surreal. I feel like I'm pinching myself every day that I have another book out in the world. It's not something I take for granted. It's really, really hard work to write a book. And at this point, it's not mine anymore. It's yours. It belongs to whoever picks it up, and they finish the story and they make it their own. So to have people praise it, to have people review it, leave nice reviews on the web, it means the world to me. Yeah, this was probably my most personal book. It took the longest to write. So the fact that it just exists at all is a miracle to me. like 2 years ago, I would have said, I don't know if this book's coming out. I would have said, it needs so much more work, and I'm just not, I'm just not sure when I'm going to finish it. So yeah, it feels like one day I was in the grocery store, and the next day I've got a Thanksgiving dinner on the table. It's what it felt like.
I like that comparison. I'm not sure I've heard that before, so I'll use that going forward. Thank you. um, so I know Sophie talked about the book a little bit and what it covers. It is all encompassing, this book. You talk about different, families and generations and these main characters, but like weaving between the chapters of two different characters. I'm using my hand like I think everybody can see me, but it's what you've been able to do, especially with the different timelines, and just the story you told. And you just said it's been your most personal to you. So I would love to know a little bit more about that and why that is.
Yeah, one of the ways it's the most personal is that I write my mom into all my books. She's the primary reason I'm a writer, and one of the reasons I started writing novels when I did was because she'd wanted to be a novelist herself, but passed away before she could write a book. And it was about that time I decided to take my own writing much more seriously and take writing classes and read much more exhaustively and volunteer for literary organizations and volunteer to read slush piles. And I just threw myself in. I felt, if there's a lesson to be learned from my mom's life, it's that start while you can. There's no day like tomorrow, or I'm sorry, no day like today. Tomorrow's not promised. Yeah, there's no day like tomorrow either, but it's not promised. So I thought I better get to work, and my books came out of that, and I started writing largely as a means of processing my grief, of communicating with my mom and putting her in my stories. And the character of Mariel in this book has got more of my mom than any other character, down from the kind of jobs she worked to her perspective on them and her life experience, and also her attitude towards her family. Yeah, there's a lot of her in here. There's also a lot of the fertility struggle that my partner and Brooke and I encountered in our own lives in the years leading up to me writing this book and through writing this book. I started writing it when we were just about to complete our first trimester with our first successful pregnancy and about 7 years of trying. So yeah, this book and my son were raised at the same time. And as such, he was a little baby sitting by my feet, being rocked by my left foot while I typed. So, yeah, this book's dedicated to him, and it wouldn't be here without him. He just lit up our hearts in a way that we sorely needed, and made this book possible, but also took this book in a direction that I didn't anticipate when I started writing it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure how you could anticipate where this was going to go. Especially because it does cover so many topics, and I would say maybe a majority of it covers rifts between family, you know to your point, we've only got today. I kept thinking and reading throughout the book, and if I could show you all of the times that I screen, like I took a photo of this book and wrote down the quotes, and because I have been in a mental space to some degree, where my husband and I, we miscarried last June and the end of July. And so when you were talking about this, and you were talking about it at such a personal level, it wasn't just like this is it. It was a large part of the story, and I think there was the one sentence or two, maybe it's two or three sentences that really stuck with me. And then I'm going to go back to the beginning and the questions, but I just would be remiss if I didn't tell you how much you helped me, because I would cry. I'd be crying in bed, just thinking about all the loss and the um, I mean, I don't even want to go so far into it because I'm going to start crying, and we're only at the beginning of this. But
I'll probably start crying too if you do.
works. But it is such an important topic. I think it's a topic that is being discussed more now. But the way that you did it, and one of the questions that I'll want to talk about a little bit later is just how you write female characters. It is like out of this world. You do it with a sensitivity. You do it with a complex. It's also complex. Families are complex. But the two things I wrote down, and I said, do not forget to share these two things, which is just we meet a character along the way. Her name is Brenda, and Brenda and Mariel are spending some time together because of an incident that happens. And Brenda said, you know, when Mariel's talking about the miscarriage for the first time, which we all remember that first time because it's super hard. And she said, you know, it's sad. I think we should take some time and be sad about it. And that's where you got me crying once. And then the breakdown of the word of miscarriage. How kind of, I think the word used is like how the term is terrible because miscarry, you know, it almost makes us as women feel like we're to blame or we've done something wrong. And I know that I've struggled with that for a really long time. And so just so you know, like it's gotten me. I have these little post-it notes of books and quotes I love, and those two are up and prominent. And so I'm super grateful for that. But enough about me, because this is all about you. Going back to really the beginning of the book. So I know you love the Great Midwest. That's very good. And I liked the name of the town that this was set in, which was Bearjaw, Lake, Minnesota. And that's where, at the time, it was called Betty's Lakeside Supper Club. You know, it was such a special place. And so I would love to know a little bit more about how you decided to talk about supper clubs. And you know, what those mean to you.
Well, first of all, I want to say that I'm really grateful that my experience with infertility and miscarriages resonated with you because it was such an isolating and lonely experience for me and Brooke. That having that first conversation as we did with the Brenda in our life, what a tremendously validating and affirming conversation that was. I just needed to have it in the book. I'm really glad you brought up Brenda. She's a tremendously important character in the book that almost nobody brings up. And it really resonates to me that you brought her up right away because she's so important, so important to Mariel. In supper clubs, like to take a 180 here, I just had to stop and recognize that because that's such a wonderful thing to talk about because, like you said, it's rarely talked about. And I never read a novel by a man that mentions infertility, let alone male infertility, or you know, or if and it also, as you put it, you know, it's not a plot point, it's a life event. having been through it, I couldn't do it a disservice and just have it be like you know, what's the word, just a narrative element. It's a tremendously consequential emotional event, and I wanted it to feel that way to readers. And so, trigger warning, but also, if you've been through it, maybe, maybe you'll see some of your own journey in it. That was my intent, was to help readers like me feel a little less alone in their own journey. And I wrote to myself in this book some of the things that I heard that helped, and some of the things that I needed to hear.
Yeah.
All right, supper clubs. Different note. Um, I worked in one as a teenager. I worked at the Steamboat Inn in Prescott, Wisconsin. I got to interview my old boss, Mike Rowan, for this wonderful book. And well, my wonderful, I don't know if the book's wonderful, but he was wonderful. He did a real generous job giving me detail that I used in this book to flesh out the day-to-day life of the supper club, and what life was like raising a family who had children work at the supper club at a young age, and the kind of things the children would do, whether working or idling at the supper club, where they were allowed to hang out in a large restaurant with a full bar and adults everywhere. Like, where do you put your 8-year-old? You know, I needed to know that kind of stuff because I wasn't privy to that experience. But yeah, it was important to me because these are family restaurants in every sense of the word. And when you're running a supper club, especially in the summer, you don't have childcare. It's your kids probably gonna be right there with you, like doing whatever it is they can do from the age they're able. And that's one of the things I love about this style of restaurant in particular, is that it's less weird at a supper club. It's almost de rigueur. But then again, that also engenders in the children either a sense of belonging and accepted, received responsibility, or great disgust. Yeah, and distaste towards restaurant work of all kinds, let alone inheriting and owning one. And so I put both perspectives in the book throughout as well. But they were my favorite kind of restaurant growing up in the Midwest, because there's nothing like them. They're real community assets, like in a way that restaurants can be at their best, that where they're masterfully intimate third spaces for people to congregate outside of work or home and hang out with their friends and neighbors and enjoy what most likely is the best local food the region has to offer. Since most supper clubs are in isolated rural or vacation areas, yeah, they've risen to the task of being, this is where you're going to spend the most significant night of your vacation, of your summer, of your year. Here's the restaurant for you. But they invariably also have a bar that's for locals, that isn't as, what's the word, high price point or consequential in terms of its economics. Like, it's usually a value price bar. I mean, I suppose you can scale up. You don't have to get the well cocktails, but most of the supper clubs I've been to have a thriving economy around its bar, mostly locals. And the dining room is, because of the price points of the food, are, see less regulars. Or I don't know anyone who eats at a supper club every day or like more than once a week, but it still has that atmosphere of, you come here and you're around locals. You can be a regular, and I love that. I've always loved that, and because of the family-owned nature of supper clubs, they enforce the possibility of relationships at a restaurant and not merely transactions.
I love that. It's something I actually have been talking to my mom about a little bit more recently. Not necessarily supper clubs, but the idea of relationships and them not being transactional and being meaningful and having conversations and just kind of enjoying and being open and honest. And that's definitely how I like to try and live. It's not not easy every single day, but I could tell the love and the I felt like I was there, and I felt like I was making friends with some of the people, even if it was just walking through the door and saying hello. And there are not too many places like that, so it definitely seemed extremely just, I don't know. I want to go and visit all all of supper club, so I can feel as as everybody else. But that's a story for another day. So when I was reading the book, and I kind of saw that I saw it in a way of like it being three main characters. I think it was Mariel, Florence, and Ned, for me, as that's how my mind was able to break it down. And then there's this huge supporting cast, like, and they're not just like supporting cast in the way that, like, they're one-offs. They all actually like contribute to this entire story that you're telling. And so i i I guess I wonder if you see it that way, but also how you were able to write all of these cast of characters, especially the main ones. And um, yeah, I mean, I kept thinking about it. I was like, I'm following along, but I have no idea how somebody could do this. So
Wow. Yeah, I love a large cast. I know it's a little more challenging for some readers to follow a wide variety of people, but it felt unrealistic to me, particularly in a restaurant setting, to pretend that there's only three people here. Yeah, I didn't want to just imply the existence of others. I really wanted to get them involved and get to know them, because restaurants are one of those workplaces that draw from a diverse array of people in terms of age, quite often socioeconomic background, um, race, gender, you name it. Like if it's a variable, like chances are, um, it's it's an awful lot of people. I'll put it this way: an awful lot of people I know have worked at restaurants one point or another, and I think it's a real formative experience uh, to work at a place like that where you're, working with people you wouldn't have necessarily chosen towards a common good every day, and you reset. Yeah, both back of house and front of house, and also work amongst a cast of characters that changes every day. Like your immediate cohort, whether if it's in the kitchen or front of house or at the bar, might be somewhat regular, uh, but the customers always change. This just lends a tremendous um, it lends a lot of possibility to explore drama of all kinds. I'll put it that way. It's just a, a beautiful font for um, people making mistakes, people being better than they ought to be, people impressing themselves in each other, people making choices that have consequences. Yeah, it's just a ideal cauldron for relationships of all styles. And I'd always wanted to set a book in one because I love restaurants and I love my experience working back a house at the Steamboat Inn. And I'd always been meaning to write about it because supper clubs are such a northern Midwest phenomenon. Um, there aren't many restaurants like them, quite like them in other places. And I thought, I want to write about them before they're gone. Yeah, there's still quite a few going strong. It's hard to tell will they'll be in 30 or 40 years, but one thing I did notice having written this book during the pandemic was how, compared to most other restaurants, difficult it was for supper clubs to pivot to just delivery or takeout. There's such a tremendously valuable and unique part of the supper club experience that's dependent on you being there. That's environmentally focused. That's you walking through those wooden doors into that lounge and sitting down and looking at the taxidermy on the walls and listening to the polka music and seeing the salad bar and just being transported to a different place in time. You can't get that just idling your Camry out in the parking lot and waiting for a guy to bring out a cardboard box. Like, no, you can take that prime rib home and enjoy it, but so much of the supper club experience is being in the supper club itself. And as such, I spoke to a lot of supper club owners while researching this book whose supper clubs had recently closed, either during the pandemic or just before. And it was hard, and it was hard to see a model in which they could reemerge in those communities. So I hope they can. One of the reasons I wrote this book was to incite people, as you've already said, to go seek them out. Next time you're in Wisconsin or Minnesota or Iowa, yeah, hunt them down.
And I think just back to the other question about the three main characters, to me, and you can tell me I'm wrong. I'm good with it. Being Ariel, Florence, and Ned to a large degree. I loved how the chapters, switched between the two women. But and going back through, I think it's 4 generations. But how did you see, I guess, how did you see, like, do you see them as the 3 main characters in the supporting cast? But I would be so remiss not to bring back up Brenda. And I know it is, I haven't had conversations with readers about her specifically. But the fact that, Mariel ended up there, well, given what happens, and she is so imperfect, and it's kind of like, oh my gosh, like, what is this crazy woman doing? But then I'm like, wow, I relate completely to her, so what is this crazy person? Oh, I think, it probably, I would imagine in your conversations that, between Florence and Brenda specifically, there's probably a lot of room for people to not like them, or, not truly understand them. But I just saw them as people who are trying to do the best that they could, given their circumstances. And, I actually rooted for them. I thought Florence was hilarious, quite honestly. I think, again, we all have these things with our family where you got to work through it. So yeah, I would love to hear what these characters mean to you, and what they meant to the book when you were writing about them.
Yeah, with both of those characters, they're both parents. They both have some difficulty in their past. And as you put it, yeah, they're making the best decisions they can with the tools they've got. Yeah, I knew my readers would judge them. Other characters certainly do. It's invited, but I think part of the point of the book is to not judge them. One of the things I wanted to get across in writing these characters the way I did was to let the reader get to know them better than their own friends and relatives do. Florence in particular, I believe the reader gets to know Florence better than Mariel knows her mom.
Yeah.
And I think Mariel's relationship with her mom would be better if she knew Florence the way we did. I really wanted to kind of create that experience where the reader would have that dramatic irony, experience it, and be able to think about, oh, how would things have been different in this family had Florence been a little more transparent with her daughter about her vulnerabilities. But then again, Florence is the person who she is. She is who she is, and has certain strengths and weaknesses because of how she's reacted to those vulnerabilities and traumas in her past. Same with Brenda. And I wanted to put each woman on a redemptive course where they could prove that it's not too late for them to change, and to somewhat upend as well the notions that other people have about them. One of the things I wanted to say with these characters is it's never too late to surprise the community that you that thinks they have you figured out. Yeah, it's also never too late to be the parent your child needs. That's one of the themes of this book to me.
Yeah, I actually love that a lot, and I think when you're crafting characters and they're seemingly unlikable, but you've written them to be likable, so they can move on and they can build those relationships. And I was just thinking time and time again when, Florence is just, she's not going to, you know, she's not going to change until her and her daughter, really have that face to face and that conversation, and they get to um, kind of realign and find mutual ground. And again, this like the amount of you know things that are heartbreakingly sad, I think, but you also have that like warmth and like comfort that you're sitting there with this story. And so it's for me, it was just incredibly enjoyable to read. And you know that because I've reached out to you a gazillion times about how much I love the book. I think one of the other questions I had, and then I would love for you to be able to share about anything else, because I'm being super cautious about not spoiling anything. And talking about Marielle and Brenda's friendship, and then Marielle and Florence, and then there's Ned, who, man, he's just trying to figure out life. On
Poor guy. Yeah.
There's that, he's got his own supper club going, and Marielle has her own supper club going, and I find it interesting that he really didn't get what he thought he wanted,
Mhm.
but in the end it worked out exactly as it was supposed to, in my head as the reader. And so um I like that, when, again, you don't know what's going to happen, but then it happens, and you're like, okay, that makes sense. But I think maybe one of my last questions is for the main characters, and I think I'm talking more about Mariel, Florence, Ned. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up Betty. And then, of course, Julia. And these are all characters, if you have not read the book, that you're going to meet and you're going to fall in love with, and it all is going to make sense. But I wonder if at any point or at the end of writing, did you think, like, okay, these were all the decisions I wanted them to make to allow them to, grow and be the best versions of themselves? Or were you at any point thinking, maybe this should have gone a little differently, maybe I would have wanted it, maybe my character might have wanted it? So yeah,
Mm.
there's such big decisions. So I guess that's the point of the question, like, given their circumstances, are you happy with how it all turned out?
Yeah, I knew what the ending was going to be before I started writing, so working towards that ending was really difficult, knowing that I was eventually going to have to find my way to it. Having characters make certain decisions that felt like, okay, that's a detour. Yeah, knowing where I was heading, it felt like, oh, I'm in for a lot of tragedy. But you write 100 years of a family's life. There's going to be loss. There's going to be tragedies, but amidst it all, I think there's a lot of humor as well, a lot of laughter. I think it's my funniest book. I think there's a lot been written about how it's my heaviest book, but I think it's also my funniest because, yeah, 100 years, 4 generations. There's going to be both, and yeah, I didn't want to shortchange either. And when it came down to how these characters were going to interact with each other, um, and make these consequential decisions. Well, like I said, I knew I knew what the end game was, so there's only so much they could do. There's only so many roads they could take. Um, yeah, which is helpful to me as a writer. I'm more of a yeah, usually more of a pantser than a plotter, but when you know your ending, it helps a lot. It helps keep you focused.
And that's an interesting thing, that you knew way you wanted it to end,
Mhm.
and in a big way, I think is the best way to describe it.
Yeah.
And I've been wondering how you decided to end it in the way that you did without any spoilers, but knowing that you were kind of um, that's what your aim was
I
to get.
can Yeah, I can try. One of the themes of this book to me is about letting go of loss. Characters who have let a loss define them and look to the past, like to an often irretrievable past for answers. Um, so yeah, I knew at the end when I would have to have a character let go of her loss, it would feel like a fruition and not a mutation.
uh,
That there would be examples throughout the book of characters, her own mother, grandmother, great grandmother, who couldn't let go of their losses, and that part of the inherited trauma and family legacy of this restaurant clan is their compounding, their almost Russian nesting doll ability to let losses pile up on each other. And I knew I wanted to end with a character who could release it,
yeah,
yeah, and have it feel earned.
yeah. No, I love that. Is there anything I didn't ask about the character
Um,
a little
I
bit?
can, yeah. No,
Yeah,
I think this is pretty great, Katie. You've asked questions no one else has asked, and I just came off 3 weeks on the road, all kinds of conversations and interviews on public radio, and I've probably been asked 1,000 questions at this point, and you still managed to ask a lot that haven't been asked. It's been great. I love it. Thank you so much. But
yay.
yeah, let's turn it over to the audience, and
Yeah,
let's have Sophie take over and help us work through some of these audience questions and see what I can enlighten.
I am back. Thank you both so much. I really enjoyed watching from the behind the scenes. I actually had a question of my own, if you don't mind. Out of curiosity, what makes a supper club? I'm just a girl from South Florida. I have no idea. I kind of want to learn a bit more about that.
Oh, sure. Can I have my character Mariel describe it?
Yes.
oh, I
Yeah,
love
just a
that.
paragraph or so. Yeah. Since she was a kid, Mariel had spent countless days at Floyd and Betty's Lakeside Supper Club in scenic Bearjaw Lake, Minnesota. The place wasn't particularly scenic itself. It was just a one-story brown building with red doors and windows on the side facing the lake, but the sign outside read "Fine Dining at a Fine Value" since 1919, and since everyone trusts a neon sign, that became the duty of the owner, which, as of 2 weeks ago, had become Mariel. Now, on Mariel's watch, a proper supper club meal begins with a free relish tray. Now, that's another vocab term I'll have to define. A free relish tray and basket of bread, followed by a round of brandy old fashions, and then a lavish amount of hearty cuisine with fish on Fridays, prime rib on Saturdays, and grasshoppers for dessert. So that takes you a little bit through the kind of milieu and menu of a supper club. They're kind of quite a number of them feel kind of trapped in time. Like they probably were last remodeled in the 50s or 60s, and whether through stubbornness, economics, or foresight, or some combination thereof, or something else, most haven't remodeled. And so now it feels like you're stepping back into a retro atmosphere quite often when you enter a supper club. And that's part of the charm, and alongside with these generous portions that one of my characters calls not a meal, but a friendly opponent, that came out of the depression. That I tell that story in the book too. So they're kind of classic American restaurants, maybe not so unlike certain steakhouses or old school chop houses in a lot of cities, but in a rural area or on a lake or on a river, a little out of the way. You might have to drive through the woods or even drive on a dirt road for a ways to get there. I just did in Iowa last week. Drove on a dirt road to get to a supper club. And then you get there and there are these lovely places hidden away and have these generous drinks, huge platters. And another thing about them is the owner is almost always there. Indeed, at the supper club I went to in Iowa, the owner came out and made us bananas Foster at table side. We didn't order it. He just did it. Yeah. And they'll chat with you. They want to get to know you. Yeah, it feels like you're a guest in someone's home quite often. And part of that is this relish tray that I talked about.
I
It's
want
just a free platter of food that you're given when you sit down. And
wow.
it's like a crudité platter. Yeah.
I
And
forgot the relish. I forgot the relish.
right. And it's a weird word because like there's not relish on it. Yeah,
Right.
it's just it's like a appetizer platter of cold appetizers.
Mhm.
It could be anywhere from just your usual sliced vegetables and olives to like pickled herring, pickled watermelon rind, cheese curds. Really depends on the owner. But yeah, just like you're a guest in someone's home, you sit down and the first thing you get is this plate of free food, and right away you feel like, okay, this is not the usual restaurant. Yeah, I can get comfortable here.
Well, thank you for answering. We're going to move on to the audience Q&A.
Yeah.
So if you haven't gotten your questions in, please do so now. I'm going to be reading them out. We have our first question asking, what are some of the best supper club dishes that you've had? And what state has the best supper clubs? I vote for Wisconsin, where they use real ice cream in their grasshoppers, pink squirrels, Brandy Alexanders, etc.
Great comment. I'd have to agree with Wisconsin. Even as a Minnesota born and raised person, Minnesota has plenty of supper clubs. Wisconsin is the supper club king. And yeah, oh boy, I think you go on the night where they're leaning into something that is a supper club strength. Like Friday is fish night. If you go on Friday, don't order the steak, order the fish. Saturday is prime rib night. That's what you order on Saturday. Any other night of the week, they usually have some kind of special. It varies from supper to supper club, but you can always depend on having a good, nice piece of red meat or a good fillet of fish at any supper club, pretty much year round.
Will you continue a Midwest food and drink theme in your next novel?
I'm not sure yet. I haven't started writing my next novel yet, but it's quite likely there will be a Midwest setting and some kind of food or drink topic explored. I'm not sure if it'll be quite as regionally specific as this book was. Right now, I'm kind of leaning towards something more general, but we'll see. Like I said, I haven't started writing it yet, but that's kind of been my focus throughout my writing career so far is increasingly specific Midwest genre food and drink. So I think for my next book, I'm going to probably take a step back and widen the net and write about something a bit more general. But I can say with at least 70% certainty there will be a Midwest setting and food or drink. I just can't quit those things.
It's your niche. I'm so grateful for your books. They really feel like home to me. They make clear that you have a love for food and beer. Do you like to cook yourself, or is that one of your connections with your mom?
Do I like to cook what? I'm sorry?
Do you like to cook yourself, or is that one of your connections with your mom?
I think my connection with my mom in the kitchen was more related to eating than cooking. We were both enthusiastic end users and enjoyers of cocktails. I know every year on her death day, I go out and have a fruity cocktail that she would have had, that she enjoyed while she was alive. But yeah, I enjoy cooking, but yeah, that wasn't one of the things that my mom and I bonded over. She actually disliked cooking. I like cooking more than she did. But then again, she had more kids to feed than I did and did so under more adverse economic circumstances than I did. So I think cooking was more of a material labor. Looking back, it was something that, hey, I got to feed these kids. I got to get from point A to point B. It's an obligation as opposed to a joy, I think, for her quite often. So I wish I would have, I don't know, I wish she would have lived longer. So it would have been like I could have shared my experiences with her and we could have made it fun. It's something that I agree it's never too late to do with a parent or a relative, is to kindle joy or rekindle joy in something. And I would have liked to have that experience of cooking with her.
Writing question. When you finish writing a book, do you jump right into writing the next, or do you give yourself a vacation from writing?
Well, I'm giving myself a vacation from writing this time, largely because I don't have much of a choice. Been very busy promoting this book, but also when I'm home, as I am now, I'm actually in a rental house because our current house is being renovated due to a storm damage. So, um, yeah, I'm at the house every day, meeting contractors and talking with insurance adjusters and being on the phone with people trying to schedule repairs. So that's a tremendously time consuming and stressful experience. And then just being out of the home, just being forced out of our home in the first place, but also, dealing with going back to this house that right now is ripped down to the studs and meeting with people and getting competing bids over like who's going to put on our kitchen tile. We're trying to, now that we're at this point where things are going to be built soon, we're trying to find the fun in it. We started watching home improvement shows like Renovation 911, which is two women from Minnesota. It's really wonderful. That's been our favorite. But yeah, so we're trying to find the joy in it. Like, oh yeah, let's go out to this vendor's warehouse and pick kitchen backsplash tile today. It's like, okay, that's not miserable. We didn't anticipate having to do this, but then there's my day. It's like I've got a toddler as well, and it's like, yeah, the part of the day that would have been spent writing is now spent looking at backsplash tile. So I think maybe by this fall or so, when we're back in the house, I can start working on the book again. There's also a certain amount of like this unease that comes with being dislocated involuntarily, and you're just thinking about how can I get back to the house and how can I keep my family happy and how can I help keep morale up. It's been such a difficult time. So yeah, with all those things, I haven't started the new book yet.
Yeah, well, we definitely want you to write at your best.
Yeah, that's another thing. I think a lot of what I'd write now would probably be scrapped ultimately. I mean, it might be good for me to be writing, to just have that in my life right now, but I think it would just be therapeutic and not public.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Yeah.
I think those are all the questions that we have for tonight. But to end off, I just wanted to ask, what do you want readers to take away from this book?
Oh, wow. Well, that's such a nice question.
But just
yeah, quite a few things that I've mentioned already, like love for them to read this book and feel like going to check out a supper club. I'd love for them to think about their family in a way that isn't conclusive, to think that, hey, it's never too late for my parent to become a better parent or for me to be a better parent to my child. And it's never too late to let go or redefine the role that loss has in my life. So I'd say those three things. But perhaps most fun of all, like, go somewhere and order a brandy old fashioned and transport yourself to rural Wisconsin for a night in a good way.
Sophie, can I ask one question?
Yeah.
I have to know what Jay Ryan, what your favorite cocktail is.
Oh, wow. My favorite cocktail? Oh, that's tough.
I saw one from last week where you were somewhere, and I was just like, this is an important topic because it's discussed in the book. So I gotta know.
This is going to be, what's the word? Just sacrilegious, given what I've written about. But I'd say a rye old fashioned. I'd say that's the classic old fashioned with like, yeah, rye or bourbon. Yeah, one of those two. Like, yeah, no, brandy old fashions are not my favorite. Give me a rye or bourbon.
Big disclosure. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't always have to write what you love. You can write what you like pretty well. Yeah. You just have to be prepared to get it for free from time to time on your tour. Like in my first book, there was that peanut butter bars recipe. I got a lot of peanut butter bars in that tour. So in that case, I'm glad I wrote what I loved. Yeah.
Well, Jay Ryan, Katie, thank you both so much. I really enjoyed watching this. To the audience, thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
On behalf of Books and Books, Thank you. We really appreciate it. This was a lovely conversation. You guys did great. And I hope you guys have an incredible afternoon, evening, night. I do not know where you guys are. There's a green button below our There's a green button below our faces where you can click the button and it'll take you to the link to purchase the book. So please buy your copy of Saturday Night at the Lakeside Supper Club. Maybe go to a supper club to celebrate, who knows? But I'm going to be ending the broadcast, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
You
For having
Bye.
us.
Bye.
Great to work with you, Katie. Thank you.
You too.